Federation of Government Employees and the National Treasury Employees Union and other employee organizations representing more than 2 million federal employees have repeatedly warned that this proposal would be detrimental to the federal workforce, morale, recruitment, and retention. Importantly, federal probationary employees do not receive the full due process protections, including appeal rights that are afforded to permanent federal workers, and therefore are limited in their ability to challenge unfair disciplinary actions and unlawful job terminations. They also do not enjoy full collective bargaining rights and are expressly excluded from standard labor agreements that protect federal workers against adverse employment actions. It is in view of these limitations and their impact on federal workforce morale that Congress, on a bipartisan basis, in 2021 repealed the pilot 2-year probationary period for new employees at the Department of Defense. It was not working. It was hurting our ability to attract good employees. We're in a competition here against the private sector, and we've done this before and it didn't work. Hello? This attempt to extend the period during which federal employees do not have full due process and other labor rights also comes amid a reduction of force of the federal workforce by targeting and firing probationary employees en masse. President Trump recently fired 200,000 federal employees. Didn't ask which ones were doing a good job, didn't ask which ones needed to be fired, just fired everybody. In April, President Trump issued an executive order significantly expanding the reasons allowing the removal of probationary employees, including firings based on an agency supervisory board's determination that continued employment would not, quote, advance organizational goals or serve agency needs of interest. Since taking office, President Trump has, in fact, as I said, fired more than 25,000 probationary federal employees across the federal government, from 2,400 probationary employees at the Department of Veterans Affairs, including the workers at the Veterans Suicide Hotline in the middle of a suicide crisis, to more than 3,000 probationary employees at the Department of Health and Human Services. These unlawful firings are still the subject of litigation filed by federal employee unions and pro-democracy advocates with the support of the Democratic House Litigation Task Force, of which I am a member. As reported by the Nonpartisan Partnership for Public Service and its Federal Harms Tracker, these and other attacks against our federal employees to date resulted in more than 211,000 federal civil servants leaving the federal government, including nearly 13,000 employees at the VA, 15,000 employees at HHS, and over 60,000 employees at the Department of Defense. According to the partnership, which is dedicated to making government more efficient, and I quote, "This campaign to weaken the federal civil service has targeted the very people who keep our government running and provide essential services that we all rely on every day." Regrettably, the legislation before us does the same, and I urge my colleagues to support my amendment and oppose the underlying bill, and I yield that back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. I recognize myself to speak on the Lynch amendment. I want to thank Mr. Lynch for offering this amendment aimed at replacing the bill with a provision directing GAO to study the impact of lengthening probationary periods. However, I oppose this amendment, which would gut the underlying bill and deny its improvements to the federal workforce. The simple truth is that the underlying proposal, extending federal employee probationary periods and affirmative certification of employees' value to the federal government and American taxpayer, is not new, with the GAO itself having already studied this issue via a February 2015 report calling for these reforms. It's for these reasons that I oppose this amendment and urge my colleagues to do the same. Chair now recognizes ranking member.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to thank Representative Lynch for offering this important amendment. Any organization, of course, needs to hire and fire the best people, but the legislation we're considering today is rushed and potentially, as we know, harmful. I support this amendment. Committee Democrats support this amendment, which would require the GAO to study how the bill would actually work before rushing through the changes that would allow the president to fire more federal workers. I urge my colleagues to support the amendment, and with that, we yield back. Yeah, and I'd like to yield Mr. Lynch some time.
Mr. Lynch.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. Thank the gentleman for yielding. I just want to point out, so at the United States Postal Service, they had a very long probationary period, and when Postmaster General DeJoy came in, appointed by President Trump, he got rid of that. He got rid of that because we needed to bring on new employees, and it was such a drag, and it created such dissension among the workforce. And remember, The United States Postal Service has 100,000 less people today than it did 20 years ago. So they've been bringing in automation. They've been working with the unions there. It's not an adversarial relationship all the time. But I think, you know, Postmaster General DeJoy knew his business. You know, he knew operations, he knew efficiency, and he got rid of that voluntarily and said, this is hurting the organization, this is hurting our efficiency, so I'm going to do away with it. So now when folks come on, they don't have quote-unquote casual employees like they used to do years ago. They bring people in, and they train them, and they impress upon them they're in a career, and it's a good vibe and a good way to treat your employees with respect. So, you know, take a look. I just advise members, take a look at what happened at DOD when we did this. We lost a lot of good employees, and we are in a daily competition. I see what's going on at the VA. We got nurses that can walk across the street at a private hospital and basically double their pay. So how do we get VA nurses to stay on the job? How do we get therapists? You know, we got a lot of veterans that need care desperately. And, you know, President Trump just laid off 13,000. And we got a backlog of cases now. We're not taking care of our veterans. And this is going to make it worse. Because, you know, a new nurse, probably with student loans, is going to look at going on to the federal, you know, workforce and saying, okay, I'm going to have no rights for a couple of years. And if I go to a private hospital, the pay is better, the hours are probably a lot better, the benefits are better. How do we get that person to come to work at the VA? So there's real managerial problems with the underlying bill, and I'm trying to get at that. And you know, this is not new. Some of us have been here a while. We've seen this before, and it didn't work out well, and this is not going to work out well either. So, but with that, I yield back my time to the ranking member.
Yield back. Chair recognizes Mr. Biggs from Arizona.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I would have sworn that I had heard earlier in this debate on this bill of the nonpartisan nature of the federal workforce. Now, there's about 2.4 million people, 2.3 million people in the federal workforce, according to the Office of Personnel Management. And I thought, well, it'd be interesting, you know, if it's really nonpartisan, then we should see something pretty similar. I'm just going to take this as my variable. I'm going to look at donations to political campaigns just to see how that worked out. So of that federal workforce, 30% of donations went to Republicans and 70% went to Democrats. And that's interesting because it's by a 2-to-1 margin, better than 2-to-1 margin. It's not nonpartisan, it's very partisan. Two agencies didn't have any donations to Republicans at all, and not surprisingly, it is the Department of Education and the Office of Personnel Management. They didn't have any. And then so I thought, well, what did they give to in the vice presidential race, the presidential race when you had Vice President Kamala Harris running? 84% of federal employees gave money to Kamala Harris, and about 16% gave to President Trump. The ratio was $3.5 million to $675,000. Somebody mentioned recently in the debate here about the unions, about the federal unions. And I thought that was interesting because let's see what they did. Well, AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees, 96% of donations in the last cycle went to Democrats. That's interesting. And then it was didn't perform as well for Democrats as the National Treasury Employees Union, which had 98% going to Democrats. And so the point being is, if you're arguing that somehow this bill is going to make us less partisan, I'm trying to conceive of how we could possibly be less partisan than we excuse me, how we are so partisan now. I'm not sure that anything will actually shrink the partisanship that's there, and that's just why this is important. This bill is important because it actually gets to shrinking the federal government. And the fundamental difference that you see here is the arguments being made by my colleagues on the other side is that they don't want to shrink the federal government. And I want to shrink the federal government. I think the federal government is bloated and overbig. 2.4 million employees. That's a lot of folks working that could be doing something different. And we should probably shrink the footprint. We had an overwhelming vote yesterday to actually take down and reduce, and it was a bipartisan vote, to reduce the number of crimes created by regulation or statute. And there's, as I pointed out yesterday, there's somewhere in the neighborhood of 400,000 crimes created by regulation. Well, as long as you have fiefdoms created and you have people saying, well, I need to work here, and this is where I'm going to work, you're going to protect those. So everybody who voted yesterday to shrink or at least study, at least count, because we don't even know what the real number is, count the number of criminal violations in the regulations and statutes, to vote here today and say, well, we don't want to do this because it might reduce the size and scope of the federal government. I think those are disingenuous, or at least certainly incongruent arguments and positions. And so, Mr. Chairman, I have to regretfully oppose Mr. Lynch's proposed amendment, as well as support Mr. Gill's underlying bill, and I'll yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Any other members seek recognition? Chair recognizes Mr. Gill from Texas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I too oppose this amendment and urge my colleagues to support the underlying bill. Listen, this is a very common sense piece of legislation that simply says that we are going to have a 2-year probationary period for federal workers, during which time we can evaluate them and their managers can determine whether their employment for the federal government makes sense for American taxpayers. We hear that unions are opposed to this, and that's no surprise to anybody. But the reality is that we represent the American people whose tax dollars we are stewarding, not union bosses who are engaged in collective bargaining against the American taxpayer. Once federal workers are outside of this probationary period, they receive virtual tenure. They're incredibly difficult to fire or to get rid of. And the purpose of their employment is to serve the American people, to make federal services better. Our federal programs are not intended to be jobs programs for substandard government workers. So I urge my colleagues to support this common sense bill to ensure that federal workers are, in fact, meeting basic standards of competency, giving more discretion to managers to ensure that we are stewarding tax dollars appropriately, and as Mr. Biggs said, right-sizing the federal government. With that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Any other members wish to speak on the Lynch amendment? Representative Crane, Arizona.
Yeah, I oppose this amendment, and I just want to offer my full support for Mr. Gill's bill here, which would just increase the probationary period for federal employees from 1 year to 2 years. I think that's completely rational, and I think it does protect the American taxpayers. I joined a community in the Navy called Naval Special Warfare. I was on probation for 2 years. I knew that if I screwed up or didn't do my job or live up to the standards, I would be let go, and I had no problem with it because I wanted to be a part of a community that actually did its job and had standards. And so I commend Mr. Gill on his bill. I think it'll be good for the American people. The American people do feel like Washington, D.C. is extremely bloated. They know how difficult it is for us to get rid of bureaucrats who aren't doing their job, and I think this bill helps a lot. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Well said. Any other members seek recognition? The question is now on the amendment offered by Mr. Lynch from Massachusetts. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All those opposed signify by saying no. No. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it, and the amendment is not agreed to.
Recorded vote, Mr. Chair.
A recorded vote is ordered. As previously announced, further proceedings on the question will be postponed. Our next item for consideration is H.R. 5749, the Official Time Reporting Act. The clerk will please designate the bill.
H.R. 5749, the Official Time Reporting Act, a bill to amend Title V United States Code to require that the Office of Personnel Management submit an annual report to Congress relating to the use of official time by federal employees.
Without objection, the bill should be considered as read and open for amendment at any point. Without objection, so ordered. The chair recognizes himself to offer an amendment in the nature of a substitute. The clerk, please designate the amendment.
An amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 5749 is offered by Mr. Comer of Kentucky.
Without objection, the amendment is considered as read, and the substitute will be considered as original text for the purposes of further amendment. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes for a statement on the bill and the amendment. The average American is likely unaware of the concept of official time. Official time is the amount of time taxpayers pay for federal employees to work on behalf of labor unions rather than their official duty of serving the American public. The simple truth is that while official time may be beneficial to federal employees and union bosses, it comes at the expense of hardworking taxpayers. While it is an open question whether or not taxpayer-funded official time is valuable for the American taxpayer, we should all agree that transparency is necessary for Congress to conduct proper oversight on this issue. President Trump issued an executive order and first of its kind report in 2019 providing this very information. Unfortunately, President Biden issued an executive order repealing that same policy as one of his first acts as president. Following his reelection, President Trump's Office of Personnel Management directed the release of a study on union time in the federal workforce, which was released in August. This report revealed the tremendous amount of taxpayer resources spent funding union activities rather than serving the American people. Dr. Fox's bill would codify reporting requirements necessary to ensure that the transparency and accountability provided by such reports transcends changes in executive branch leadership. I urge my colleagues to support this legislation. I yield to the ranking member for his remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I oppose this bill, which represents an attack on federal employees and on union worker rights. Official time is work time that employees are allowed to use for making the workplace safe, protecting workers from discrimination or harassment. We all know that union representatives cannot use official time for union-only activities like signing up new members, collecting dues, choosing union leaders, or holding internal union meetings. Official time is important because it helps the federal workforce run smoothly. It can lower employee turnover, improve customer service, prevent expensive legal problems, and help agencies implement new programs and rules more quickly. And importantly, it is only available to a few workers. This bill is designed to enable future attacks on official time and restrictions on federal workers' rights to organize. This bill is opposed by AFGE, other federal employee unions, and the AFL-CIO. I oppose it, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair now recognizes the sponsor of the bill, Dr. Fox from North Carolina.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And let me begin by asking unanimous consent to enter into the record the following letter of support, a letter of support from the National Taxpayers Union for H.R. 5749, the Official Time Reporting Act.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, we've talked a lot this year about how the federal government can and should operate in a more efficient, transparent, and accountable way. Today, with consideration of my bill, H.R. 5749, the Official Time Reporting Act, we have an opportunity to advance legislation to do just that. The Official Time Reporting Act will let the American people know exactly how much of their hard-earned money is spent not providing valuable services, but on federal employee union activities. This bill simply requires all agencies to report on the cost of taxpayer-funded union time and to justify any aggregate annual increases. Frankly, many Americans may be surprised to hear that federal employees can use official time to perform duties related to government employee unions. This includes activities such as negotiating new union contracts, handling disputes, or, quote, general labor-management relations, end quote. In fact, in fiscal year 2024, nearly $208 million was spent across the federal government on taxpayer-funded official time. This is a staggering amount of money. In 2018, President Trump issued an executive order requiring federal agencies to report on exactly how much taxpayer-funded official time was used for union duties. However, in 2021, the Biden administration sadly reversed this policy and opted to obscure the true cost of union time to taxpayers.
Okay.
Nevertheless, at the start of the new Trump administration, agencies were once again required to report on the use of taxpayer-funded union time. Transparency must be durable and not subject to the whims of an administration. H.R. 5749, the Official Time Reporting Act, would make transparency and accountability the law of the land and ensure that no future administration can undo the taxpayer-funded union time reporting requirements. We owe it to taxpayers to make sure that every tax dollar is used well to provide high-quality services. This starts by providing a full accounting for every tax dollar spent on union activities. I urge my colleagues to support H.R. 5749, the Official Time Reporting Act, and I yield back.
Chair yields back. Gentlelady yields back. Chair recognizes Mr. Frost from Florida.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I oppose this bill, which builds upon the Trump administration's all-out assault on people's right to a dignified job. This year, under the Trump administration, federal employees have faced job insecurity, financial strain, and the loss of collective bargaining agreements. This bill will make matters worse. We all benefit when unions and their members are empowered to prevent and address retaliation, discrimination, and sexual harassment. It helps federal employees do their job well. The return on investment for letting federal employees use official time to make government more efficient, productive, is very high. This harmful bill would crack down on union rights and collective bargaining. It aims to exclude thousands of federal workers from exercising their First Amendment rights, and it further degrades the important work of unions and union members. And I also have to say, you know, in the debate on the last bill, one of my colleagues brought up the fact that he's concerned or annoyed or was whining about the fact that many federal employees don't support their party. And then they put forth bills like this, and then you have a president like Donald Trump who is slashing away their collective bargaining, making it so they don't have, so they have job insecurity, financial strain, and the loss of their right to bargain collectively and together. That might be one of the reasons why many federal workers aren't super jazzed about this administration. Maybe it's that someone like Russell Vought literally said that he wants federal workers to be traumatized. So it's not confusing to me why a group of mostly working class people are not jazzed about what this administration is doing to their own lives and to their own livelihood. I also have to say, this is about government efficiency. It's about making sure that people are doing their jobs well. I think we have to look at some of the political appointees at the highest levels of this administration. I'd say it's not doing your job well to, say, put a reporter in a signal chain that has war plans. But I don't hear anything from the other side about cracking down on that. You want to crack down on working class people who are trying to do a very important job for our country with barely any resources and take away their collective bargaining? I mean, it's ridiculous. Hardworking Central Floridians want their government to make their jobs safer and better, more fulfilling, not less. And my district and myself, we oppose these ill-conceived efforts to rip away collective bargaining for federal workers. Yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Any other members? Mr. Walkinshaw.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm also opposed to the bill and just want to note it's been said OPM already tracks and issues a report on official time. Both the Trump administration and Dr. Fox used the phrase taxpayer-funded union time. Under the law, official time cannot be used for political activity, for personal business, for union recruitment, for any work disruption activity, or any work that's not related to representing employees and improving the function of that agency. Among the flaws in the bill is the fact that it doesn't ask OPM to look at or report on the many benefits of official time. And the Merit System Protection Board, the Government Accountability Office, and other independent organizations have demonstrated that official time reduces costly legal disputes, improves morale in agencies, helps agencies resolve problems earlier before they become bigger problems that are more expensive and cost just a fraction of the arbitration or litigation that could result from official time not existing. So for those reasons, Mr. Chairman, I'm opposed to the bill and I yield back.
Any other members seek recognition? Seeing none. The question is now on the amendment in the nature of a substitute. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed signify by saying no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. The question is now in favor of reporting H.R. 5749 as amended. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The bill is ordered favorably reported as amended.
Recorded vote, please.
Recorded vote is ordered. As previously announced, further proceedings on the question will be postponed. Item for consideration is H.R. 6329, the Information Quality Assurance Act of 2025. The clerk will please designate the bill.
H.R. 6329, the Information Quality Assurance Act of 2025, a bill to ensure that federal agencies rely on the best reasonably available scientific, technical, demographic, economical, and statistical information and evidence to develop, issue, or inform the public of the nature and basis of federal agency rules and guidance and for other purposes.
Without objection, the bill should be considered as read and open for amendment at any point. Without objection to order, the chair recognizes himself to offer an amendment in the nature of a substitute. The clerk please designate the amendment.
An amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 6329 is offered by Mr. Comer of Kentucky.
Without objection, the amendment is considered as read and the substitute will be considered as original text for the purposes of further amendment. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes for a statement on the bill. I'm pleased to support this bill, the Information Quality Assurance Act of 2025. Historically, thousands of federal regulations have been imposed each year as an added burden on the American public. The Code of Federal Regulations in which these rules are housed spans 243 volumes and contain over 180,000 single-spaced pages. Agency guidance explaining these regulations to the public likely spans millions more pages. If we must have rules imposed by federal regulatory agencies, we should, at the very least, ensure that regulatory agencies rely on the best available information. Unfortunately, agencies frequently do not rely on the best available information to create the regulations. Year after year, the federal courts are clogged with litigation brought by regulated parties who point out that federal agencies have acted based on flawed information. Over the years, Congress has tried to improve the situation. In 2000, Congress enacted the Information Quality Act, which charged the Office of Management and Budget and each federal agency to adopt guidelines to assure agencies relied on high-quality information. In 2015, Congress enacted the Foundations of Evidence-Based Policymaking Act, expanding on the Information Quality Act to further ensure agencies use high-quality information in their program administration. Still, year after year, disputes arise over whether regulators are basing their decisions on the best quality information available. Every year, courts strike down agency rules that do not rely on adequate information. The Information Quality Assurance Act takes several major but straightforward steps to solve that problem. For the first time, it requires that the information on which agencies use to form the rules and guidance be the best reasonably available information. It also includes several additional terms to make sure agencies are finally held to that standard. This legislation will improve the quality of agency decision-making, improve the acceptability of new rules and guidance, and avoid the need for many disputes over agencies' use of information to go to court. I urge my colleagues to support the bill, and I thank Representative Lisa McClain, a former member of this committee, for her reintroduction of this important legislation. I now yield to the ranking member.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And we have, I know, a series of bipartisan bills in front of us. So I just want to thank the sponsor of this bill, Congresswoman McClain. This bill is about improving the quality and transparency of information at our federal agencies and what they use to make the rules. This bill would change federal law to require the director of OMB to update its guidance on the Information Quality Act. This bill also contains the ability for the public to give feedback on the information agencies use, and it requires OMB to report to Congress about any complaints. This bill passed the House overwhelmingly last Congress, and we support it again this Congress, and I yield back.
Ranking member yields back. Any other members wish to be heard? The question is now on the amendment, the nature of a substitute. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed by saying no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. The question is now in favorably reporting H.R. 6329 is amended. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed signify by saying no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the bill is. Chair recognizes Mr. Palmer. A recorded vote is ordered. As previously announced, further proceedings on the question will be postponed. Our next item for consideration is H.R. 3766, a bill to prohibit the District of Columbia from acquiring tribunals in court or administrative proceedings in the District of Columbia to defer to the mayor of the District of Columbia's interpretation of statutes and regulations, and for other purposes. The clerk will please designate the bill.
H.R. 3766, a bill to prohibit the District of Columbia from requiring tribunals in court or administrative proceedings in the District of Columbia to defer to the mayor of the District of Columbia's interpretation of statutes and regulations and for other purposes.
Without objection, the bill should be considered as read and open for amendment at any point. Without objection to order, the chair recognizes himself to offer an amendment in the nature of a substitute. The clerk please designate the amendment.
An amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 3766 is offered by Mr. Comer of Kentucky.
Without objection, the amendment is considered as read, and the substitute will be considered as original text for the purposes of further amendment. I now recognize myself for a statement on the bill and the amendment. I support H.R. 3766, which makes sure District of Columbia residents receive impartial justice from the D.C. courts in their disputes with the D.C. mayor and D.C. agencies. The D.C. Council would like something different. Twice since the United States Supreme Court landmark 2024 decision in Loper Bright Enterprises versus Raimondo, and the council has passed legislation to put a thumb on the scale in favor of the mayor and D.C. agencies when they are sued over their action. The council's legislation did that by requiring D.C. courts to defer to the mayor and the agency's interpretations of D.C. laws and regulations. This kind of deference is inherently unfair to citizens who challenge overreaching government action in court. For decades after the Supreme Court's decision in the 1984 case of Chevron versus Natural Resources Defense Council, federal courts granted this so-called Chevron deference to federal agencies when regulated entities fought back in federal court against agency overreach. Over the years, Chevron deference fueled power grab after power grab by federal agencies as courts stood aside, deferring to agency interpretations of the law. Thankfully, in its decision, the Supreme Court finally recognized the error of its ways and overruled Chevron. But the D.C. Council wants to ignore that wisdom and insist that Chevron deference live on in the D.C. courts, denying justice to D.C. residents. Congress should intervene by prohibiting the use of Chevron deference in the court, which is precisely what this bill does. It makes no sense that people in D.C. courts still have to deal with Chevron deference while people in federal courts just down the street get the full benefit of the Supreme Court's Loper Bright decision. I want to thank Representative Hageman for her leadership on this issue. I urge my colleagues to support this legislation and recognize the ranking member for his statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Democrats certainly oppose this bill in this committee. It's another attack on the over 700,000 D.C. residents and on democratic principles. This year, the Republican House has passed 9 bills to repeal or amend local D.C. laws, and we know these bills are pending on the floor calendar. As a reminder, again, D.C. has more residents in 2 states, pays more in federal taxes in 26 states, and D.C.'s locally elected officials are accountable to D.C. residents. Local leaders should be empowered to address local matters without Congress interfering, and we've said this many times. The bill in front of us, which we did not hold a hearing on, we know cancels a recent D.C. law that required D.C. courts to defer the D.C.'s government interpretation of laws or rules. The bill would result in more lawsuits, not less, and increased legal uncertainty. I urge my colleagues to oppose H.R. 3766. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Does any other member wish to be heard?
Ms. Norton, sir.
Who? Ms. Norton. Ms. Norton. Chair recognizes Ms. Norton from Washington, D.C.
Mr. Chairman, I strongly oppose this amendment. This undemocratic and paternalistic bill. This bill would repeal the District of Columbia's review of Agency Action Clarification Amendment Act of 2025 and prohibit D.C. from enacting such a law in the future. This bill would further restrict D.C.'s authority to enact and carry out local laws and policies. The D.C. local government is under unprecedented attack by Republicans in Congress and President Trump. This Congress, Republicans have introduced nearly 90 bills, amendments, and riders to repeal, block, or amend local D.C. laws and policies. The over 700,000 D.C. residents, the majority of whom are black and brown, are capable and worthy of governing themselves. If residents do not like how the members of the DC Council vote, residents can vote them out of office or pass a ballot measure. This is democracy. If DC residents do not like how the members of Congress vote on local DC matters, residents cannot vote them out of office. That is the antithesis of democracy. I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record a joint letter opposing this bill from the DC mayor, the DC council chairman, and the DC attorney general, all of whom were elected by DC residents.
Without objection, so ordered.
The substance of this bill should be irrelevant, since there is never justification for Congress to legislate on local DC matters, but I will discuss it. This bill could radically change how local DC laws and regulations are interpreted. For decades, the local DC courts have deferred to the DC executive branch's reasonable interpretation of ambiguous statutes and regulations. However, after the U.S. Supreme Court's Loper-Bright decision last year, which overruled Chevron, a question arose about whether the local DC courts would overrule their own long-standing deference precedent, which was similar to Chevron deference. In response, the DC Council enacted the Review of Agency Action Clarification Amendment Act, which codified that long-standing local precedent. DC residents have all the obligations of American citizenship, including paying federal taxes, serving on juries, and registering within the Selective Service. Yet Congress denies them full local self-government and voting representation in Congress. The only solution to this undemocratic treatment is to grant DC statehood. The DC Statehood Bill, H.R. 51, grants DC residents full local self-government and voting representation in Congress. H.R. 51 reduces the size of the federal district from 68 square miles to 2 square miles, consisting of the White House, the Capitol, the Supreme Court, and the National Mall. The residential and commercial areas of D.C. would be a new state. I urge members to vote no on H.R. 3766, Free D.C. Yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. The chair recognizes Representative Jack.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record the following letters of support. A letter of support from the National Taxpayers Union for H.R. 6329, the Information Quality Assurance Act, and a statement of support from the Data Foundation for H.R. 6329, the Information Quality Assurance Act.
Without objection, so ordered. Any other members seek recognition? Seeing none, the question is now on the on the amendment, the nature of a substitute. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed signify by saying no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. The question is now in favorably reporting H.R. 3766 as amended. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed signify by saying no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the bill is ordered favorably reported as amended.
Recorded vote, Mr. Chair.
A recorded vote is ordered as previously announced. Further proceedings on the question will be postponed. Our next item for consideration is H.R. 5810, the Federal Supervisor Education Act of 2025. The clerk will please designate the bill.
H.R. 5810, the Federal Supervisor Education Act of 2025, a bill to provide for mandatory training for federal government supervisors and the assessment of management competencies and for other purposes.
Without objection, the bill should be considered as read and open for amendment at any point. Without objection to order, the chair recognizes himself to offer an amendment in the nature of a substitute. The clerk please designate the amendment.
An amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 5810 is offered by Mr. Comer of Kentucky.
Without objection, the amendment is considered as read and the substitute will be considered as original text for the purposes of further amendment. I will now recognize myself for 5 minutes for a statement on the bill and the amendment. The American public relies on federal supervisors to lead a workforce that provides high-quality customer service and faithful execution of the law. These expectations and standards require a level of professionalism that can be improved by strengthening relevant education offerings available to federal supervisors. Mr. Timmons from South Carolina's bill would do just that by bolstering existing requirements in federal law governing federal workforce training. Various reports and memos from agencies such as the Government Accountability Office, Office of Personnel Management, and the Merit Systems Protection Board indicate a need to improve relevant educational opportunities for federal supervisors. The Federal Supervisor Education Act, a bipartisan bill dating back to the 114th Congress, articulates and executes best practices in relation to federal supervisory training, including how to effectively manage employees with unacceptable performance. And in relation to the Equals Act, which is included in today's markup, the bill also improves supervisor focus on effectively using the probationary period to examine whether an employee has demonstrated successful performance to continue past the probationary period. These are basic, nonpartisan concepts that are generally available to private sector business supervisors and, if implemented, would advance the interest of good government and strengthening the federal workforce on behalf of the American taxpayers. I urge my colleagues to support this legislation. I yield to the ranking member.
Thank you, Chairman Comer. Also to Congressman Timmons for this bill. There's going to be an amendment which I'm going to separately support, so I'm going to reserve my remarks until after the amendment is made. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
The chair recognizes the sponsor of the bill, Mr. Timmons from South Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For years, oversight Republicans have been pushing for restoring accountability and performance in the federal workforce. When taxpayer dollars pay the salaries of millions of federal employees, the public has every right to expect competent management, clear standards, and real consequences when those standards are not met. Right now, too many federal supervisors step into leadership roles without the training needed to manage people, set clear expectations, or correct poor performance. Agencies promote strong technical employees into supervisory jobs and then send them in blind. That leads to low productivity, uneven standards, and a system where good employees feel unsupported and bad employees rarely face consequences. Taxpayers deserve better, and so do the federal workers who come in every day ready to do their jobs well. This bill takes a practical approach to fixing that. It requires agencies to provide real, meaningful training to new supervisors within their first year, not just a slideshow or a checkbox exercise. That training has to cover the basics of good management, setting clear goals, giving honest and timely feedback, motivating teams, addressing poor performance, and making sure workplaces remain professional. Supervisors must then refresh this training every 3 years so the standards the American people expect continue to be met. H.R. 5810 also requires agencies to build a pipeline of future leaders. It directs them to identify and prepare employees who may become supervisors down the road instead of scrambling to fill vacancies without a plan. And the bill requires agencies to create mentoring programs so experienced supervisors can coach new ones, share lessons learned, and help them develop into strong leaders. The bill also directs the Office of Personnel Management to lay out clear expectations for what good supervision looks like. Agencies will then evaluate the supervisors based on those standards. This ensures consistency, clarity, and accountability, 3 things the federal workforce too often lacks. At the end of the day, this is a common sense reform. It does not grow government. It strengthens it. It ensures supervisors can lead effectively, hold employees accountable, and deliver results for the American people. When supervisors are better trained, employees perform better, and agencies serve taxpayers better. I encourage my colleagues to support this bill. It's a practical step toward improving the federal workforce and restoring confidence in government performance. And I appreciate the work from my colleagues across the aisle to help improve this bill. And I look forward to working with them to get it signed into law. With that, I yield back. Thank you.
Gentleman yields back. Does any other member seek to speak on the underlying bill? For what purpose does Mr. Walkinshaw seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
Will the clerk please report?
An amendment to the amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 5810 is offered by Mr. Walkinshaw of Virginia.
Will Without objection, the amendment is considered as read. I reserve a point of order. The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes to explain his amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Timmons, for his great work on this bill. My amendment strikes a provision from H.R. 5810, the Federal Supervisor Education Act, and provides agencies with the necessary autonomy to implement the act in a manner that maximizes its effectiveness. I am a strong supporter of the goal of this legislation and almost all of the language, which, as Mr. Timmons noted, will provide supervisors within the federal workforce the appropriate training and resources to ensure they're strong leaders within their respective agencies. Right now, training for new supervisors varies widely. Some agencies have 4 hours, some agencies have 80 hours, some agencies have structured mentorship programs. Some agencies just assign a guy who knows a few things to mentor new supervisors. And the support outlined in this bill for supervisors will ensure a stronger workplace, higher employee satisfaction and productivity across both supervisory employees and their direct reports, and most importantly, it lead to improved outcomes for the American people. To ensure that this is the case, my amendment removes language that would require training programs to include guidance on, quote, assessing the needs and interests of the agency with respect to a probationary employee's final appointment. This language is, in my view, subjective and outside the scope of the legislation. The bill already requires supervisors be trained on how to, quote, effectively use the probationary period to examine whether an employee has demonstrated successful performance or conduct to continue their employment. This analysis should be enough to objectively determine on merit whether a probationary employee should continue their employment. Requirements that instruct supervisors to determine employment eligibility based on agency interest open the door to a subjective analysis that I said I think is outside the scope of this good piece of legislation. Mr. Chairman, I urge my colleagues to vote yes on the amendment to ensure that the bill delivers on its full potential to both federal supervisors and, most importantly, to the American public. With that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. I want to thank Mr. Walkinshaw for offering this amendment aimed at striking one reference in the underlying bill. My understanding is that by our accepting this amendment, the bill will receive broader bipartisan support, and it is for that reason that I support this amendment and urge my colleagues to do the same with the Walkinshaw amendment. Does any other member seek recognition on the amendment? Chair recognizes the ranking member.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also want to thank Representative Walkinshaw for this amendment and, of course, the author. This would make a good bill even stronger. This amendment would make it clear that supervisors may not negatively review or remove an employee for political reasons, and I think we all should support this amendment, and I want to yield back.
Any other members seek recognition on the Walkinshaw amendment? The question is now on the amendment offered by Mr. Walkinshaw. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the amendment is agreed to. The question is now on the amendment in the nature of a substitute. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed signify by saying no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. The question is now on favorably reporting H.R. 5810 as amended. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed signify by saying no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. Chair recognizes Ms. Biggs. A recorded vote is ordered. As previously announced, further proceedings on the question will be postponed. Our next item for consideration is H.R. 6330, the Federal Relocation Payment Improvement Act. The clerk will please designate the bill.
H.R. 6330, the Federal Relocation Payment Improvement Act, a bill to amend Title V, United States Code, to provide for lump sum relocation payments for federal employees relocated in the interest of the government and for other purposes.
Without objection, the bill shall be considered as read and open for amendment at any point. Without objection, so ordered. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes for a statement on the bill and the amendment. Relocating federal employees who receive assignments to change official duty stations is a costly and bureaucratic process. According to the GSA, which is responsible for managing such relocations, in fiscal year 2024, the cost for employee relocation across agencies ranges from $11,000 to a staggering $143,000 per employee. The high cost contrasts with their private sector counterparts whose relocations costs are considerably less. In fact, current law and regulations require 7 categories of mandatory relocation entitlement and another 6 discretionary. This complexity diverts federal agency resources that could otherwise be available for other mission-focused priorities. It also comes at the expense of federal employee satisfaction, as those relocating are forced to navigate a prolonged bureaucratic maze of document filings and payment processing. Fortunately, there is a tested alternative to the current system as demonstrated by agencies such as the Fish and Wildlife Services and Customs and Border Protection in a recent pilot program. Those agencies have utilized an existing authority to provide negotiated lump sum payments to relocating employees who are then responsible for completing their moves without having to navigate the existing processes. Their simplified lump sum payments and processes have reduced agency costs while boosting employee satisfaction. This bill would expand the currently limited statutory authorities for all agencies to provide such lump sum payments to relocating employees when such alternative is the most cost-effective option. I want to thank Mr. Jack for offering this legislation, and I urge my colleagues to support it. And I yield to the ranking member for his remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank you as well and the sponsor of this bill, Congressman Jack. This bill would allow federal agencies to pay for employee relocation costs by giving a simple lump sum payment instead of reimbursing every individual expense. This is one of a series of bipartisan bills that we have in front of this committee today, and I want to thank the House majority for their work on this and for partnering with us. This bill would let GSA set up rules and make it easier for agencies to manage their relocation budgets. GSA has already tested this idea in a multi-year pilot program. The bill also requires GSA to create rules for an appeals process. I will vote yes, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes the sponsor of the legislation, Mr. Jack from Georgia.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'm honored to introduce a bill that is a win for taxpayers and federal employees alike. Tens of thousands of federal workers move to new duty stations each year. These moves can be cumbersome for the relocating employees and those managing the move. This bill will streamline and simplify a key part of that process while reducing the cost to taxpayers. This is an opportunity to save money and increase employee satisfaction in a manner that should garner bipartisan support. It's the type of government efficiency reform our constituents demand from us. I am proud to introduce the Federal Relocation Payment Improvement Act before the Oversight Committee for consideration today. As noted before, H.R. 6330 provides federal agencies the opportunity to optimize a process that could take up to 2 years and over $140,000 to complete. Under the current system, relocating employees often struggle with cash flow issues as they wait as long as a year or more for their receipts to be reimbursed for their moving expenses. This bill will permit agencies to issue a one-time upfront lump sum payment to relocating employees. It's more employee-friendly, less complex, and easier to manage, which is why it is commonly used by the private sector. And we have proof it works in the federal government. A limited number of agencies have already been utilizing this alternate payment method, which has produced many, many savings and improved employee satisfaction for all who have used it. So let's favorably report this bill today, and I encourage all of my colleagues to join me in support of this government efficiency reform. And I'd also like to thank the Oversight Committee staff for working tirelessly on this bill, and I yield back to our distinguished chairman, Mr. Comer.
Gentleman yields back. Any other members seek recognition on the Jack bill? Chair recognizes Mr. Biggs from Arizona.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I support the Jack bill. Making relocation easier supports the larger effort to move agencies and staff into the real American communities. Lump sum option saves taxpayer money, and the current reimbursement system is slow and wasteful. The lump sum approach is simple, predictable, and prevents inflated expense claims. This is a lean government reform. Private companies use lump sum relocation because it cuts red tape and controls costs. Government should follow that model instead of clinging to a bloated process. Easier relocations push decision-making closer to the people. And why is it important to make that easier? Because we do want to move people out of Washington, D.C. Why? Because Washington is wealthy, insulated, and out of touch with the rest of the country. 280,000 federal workers are in the D.C. metropolitan area, and they enjoy a 13% higher salary and benefit than comparable private sector workers. Relocating 100,000 federal jobs, say, from the Washington metropolitan area to the rest of the U.S. would save taxpayers $1.4 billion per year in federal employee locality pay adjustments. It was done in the first Trump administration to much success. And Mr. Chairman, I offer into the record an article entitled "Move Federal Agencies and Decision-Making Closer to the People."
Without objection, so ordered. Does any other member seek recognition?
Thank you.
Did you have other UCs, Mr. Biggs?
No, that was it.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Any other members seek recognition? The question is now on favorably reporting H.R. 6330 as amended. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed signify by saying no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the bill is, for what purpose does the chair recognize Mr. Biggs? Recorded vote has been ordered as previously announced. Further proceedings on the question will be postponed. Our next item for consideration is H.R. 5457, the Strengthening Agency Management and Oversight of Software Assets Act. The clerk will please designate the bill.
H.R. 5457, the Strengthening Agency Management and Oversight of Software Assets Act, a bill to improve the visibility, accountability, and oversight of agency software asset management practices and for other purposes.
Without objection, the bill should be considered as read and open for amendment at any point. Without objection, so ordered. The chair recognizes himself to offer an amendment in the nature of a substitute. The clerk will please designate the amendment.
An amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 5457 is offered by Mr. Comer of Kentucky.
Without objection, the amendment is considered as read, and the substitute will be considered as original text for the purpose of further amendment. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes for a statement on the bill and the amendment. Federal agencies spend billions of dollars a year on software licenses without a full understanding of what they are purchasing and how it compares to what they are already paying for. The result is wasteful spending on duplicative or unnecessary software licenses. H.R. 5457 will provide Congress better insight into how our federal agencies purchase and use software. The text we're considering today is identical to the text we passed out of the House by voice vote last Congress. This bill improves government software purchasing without unduly limiting the procurement options of federal agencies. It requires each agency to better manage its software and develop a plan for addressing any costly, unnecessary licenses. This will reduce wasteful spending and improve government efficiency. I thank Ms. Brown for bringing this important legislation back to the committee that's Congress. I also thank Mr. Fallon and Ms. Mace for their early support of this legislation. I urge my colleagues to support this bipartisan legislation. I now recognize the ranking member.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also want to strongly support this bipartisan reform bill, and I want to thank ranking members John Chell Brown, Subcommittee Chairwoman Mace, and Representatives Fallon and McLean Delaney for their work. Within 18 months of becoming law, this bill will require federal agency chief information officers to do a full review of all software the agency buys, uses, or deploys. This bill also requires agencies to send these software reviews to the General Services Administration, the OMB, and the Government Accountability Office, and of course, Congress. This will help lawmakers and agencies keep a closer eye on software contracts and spending. Agencies would then use the reviews to improve planning for software management, address problems, train staff, and meet other needs. I want to thank committee staff who work closely with this and the private sector for developing H.R. 5457, a good bipartisan bill, and I urge all members to vote yes, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair now recognizes the chairwoman of the Cyber Subcommittee, Ms. Mace, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As the chairwoman of the Subcommittee on Cybersecurity, Information Technology, and Government Innovation, eliminating waste and improving efficiency in government IT has been a top priority. It's been long recognized the federal government's system of software licensing and inventory management is woefully insufficient, leading to costly, unnecessary, and duplicative licenses. Federal agencies spend billions of dollars each year to purchase and license software. However, they do so without a detailed knowledge of the software they already pay for, what purchases are duplicative or wasteful, and what overlaps exist. This would be someone paying for two Netflix or Spotify accounts, and it makes no sense. This year, President Trump and DOJ identified and terminated thousands of federal software licenses, costing taxpayers millions of dollars, of which were even being used. But this is just the start. This bill would require agencies to create a comprehensive inventory of software and undergo an independent assessment of software license management practices and contracts. The bill would also require the Chief Information Officer of agencies to develop a plan to adopt enterprise licensing agreements to reduce costs of the government, and OMB to publish a government-wide strategy for software modernization. This bill would not prescribe what software agencies should buy, but rather what agencies and ways to procure and keep track of the software they procure. This is intentional. We understand as technology continues to develop, the software needs of agencies change, and we need to allow them to remain agile. But agencies can remain agile in a way that is fiscally responsible, where taxpayers aren't on the hook for duplicative, unnecessary software. I want to thank Ranking Member Brown for her leadership on this bill and partnering with me on many initiatives to modernize technology and eliminate waste in the federal government. And I urge all members to support the bill. Mr. Chairman, I urge unanimous consent in support of H.R. 5457 and enter this into the record, a letter of support from the Digital Alliance for Digital Innovation and Coalition for Fair Software Licensing, et cetera.
Without objection, so ordered. Gentlelady yields back. Chair recognizes the sponsor of the bill, Ms. Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank my colleagues, Representative Mace, Fallon, and McLean Delaney, for joining me in introducing the Strengthening Agency Management and Oversight of Software Assets Act. The Samosa Act may sound complicated, but it is simple, bipartisan bill that is urgently needed. Agencies across the federal government spend around $33 billion in taxpayer money on software every year. But right now, many agencies don't actually have a list of what they own, what they're fully using, or whether they are buying the same thing twice. Our bill creates a straightforward solution. It streamlines how agencies track, manage, and report their software assets by requiring complete assessments on the software paid for, used, or deployed at each agency. This will ensure agencies know exactly what they have, what they need, and where they are overspending. The bill requires agencies to submit these assessments to the Office of Management and Budget, General Services Administration, and Congress, so we can provide accountability and confirm agencies are using consistent, modern, and efficient software management practices. In other words, this bill will cut waste, allow agencies to negotiate better contracts, and spot vulnerabilities quickly. That means fewer headaches, better security, and real savings for taxpayers. Nearly $5 billion every year, according to one Senate committee. This is the kind of common sense work people sent us here to do. It's not flashy and it's not partisan, but it is good government and it is real government efficiency. I urge my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to support this common sense bill. But before I yield back, I also want to speak briefly in support of a postal naming measure that will be considered later on in the markup. My bill would rename the Collinwood Neighborhood Post Office in Cleveland in honor of Tech Sergeant Alma Gladys Minter, a longtime Cleveland resident and a member of the 6888, the first and only all-Black women's Army Corps unit to serve overseas in World War II. In 1945, Ms. Minter and more than 800 women were deployed to clear a backlog of 17 million pieces of mail for American troops in Europe. They finished the job in under 90 days. It's hard to think of anything more fitting than naming a post office after Tech Sergeant Minter. When no one else could, she delivered the mail, and she did it ahead of schedule. Her work kept service members connected to home and lifted morale at a critical moment in the war. I am thrilled to shine a long overdue light on Ms. Minter, and I look forward to supporting both these measures later in the markup. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Any other members seek recognition? Seeing none, the question is now on the amendment in the nature of a substitute. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed signify by saying no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. The question is now in favor of reporting H.R. 5457 as amended. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed signify by saying no.
Mr. Chairman, request a recorded vote.
Mace.
Request a recorded vote.
Recorded vote is ordered by Ms. Mace. As previously announced, further proceedings on the question will be postponed. Our next item for consideration is H.R. 5235, the Skills-Based Federal Contracting Act. The clerk will please designate the bill.
H.R. 5235, the Skills-Based Federal Contracting Act, a bill to amend Title 41, United States Code, to prohibit minimum educational requirements for proposed contractor personnel in certain contract solicitations and for other purposes.
Without objection, the bill shall be considered as read and open for amendment at any point. Without objection, so ordered. The chair recognizes himself to offer an amendment in the nature of a substitute. The clerk, please designate the amendment.
An amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 5235, as offered by Mr. Comer of Kentucky.
Without objection, the amendment is considered as read, and the substitute will be considered as original text for the purposes of further amendment. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes for a statement on the bill as amended. The federal government relies heavily on contract employees. Unfortunately, federal solicitations sometimes include unnecessary degree requirements mandating that individuals who perform the work hold certain education credentials. Training for many jobs in fields like IT and building construction is available through non-degree pathways such as apprenticeships and boot camps. This is why private sector employers have pared back degree requirements in hiring in recent years. We should not prohibit those with the right technical skills from performing federal contract work just because they lack a traditional degree. And the companies who employ them, those that offer apprenticeships and engage in skills-based hiring, should be encouraged to compete for government contracts, not be excluded from competition. This bill helps ensure that federal contractors are able to hire qualified professionals with the necessary knowledge, skills, and drive, even if they lack a traditional four-year degree. The bill does this by prohibiting contract officers from stipulating education and experience requirements for contract employees unless the contracting officer can justify in writing that they are necessary to meet the needs of the agency. I urge my colleagues to support this timely, necessary, and bipartisan bill. And I want to thank Ms. Mace, Chairwoman of the Subcommittee on Cybersecurity, Information Technology, and Government Innovation, for her work on this important reform. I now recognize the ranking member for his opening statement.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, another great bipartisan effort here in bill. I want to thank you, Mr. Chairman, for bringing it to committee for consideration today. H.R. 5235 makes it easier for Americans with significant skills but without college degrees to be hired as federal contractors. And I, of course, want to thank Representative Krishnamurthy and Mace for their bipartisan work, and I urge my colleagues to support this bill, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes the sponsor of this legislation, Chairman Mace from South Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On top of the approximately 2.3 million federal employees in this country, the federal government outsources work to millions of contractors to perform the functions of government. Many federal solicitations include unnecessary degree requirements mandating individuals who perform various tasks hold specific education credentials, such as a four-year college degree. At a hearing I held last year in the Subcommittee on Cybersecurity, Information Technology, and Government Innovation, an IBM witness testified federal contractors are rarely able to place an individual without a four-year degree on a technology services contract, regardless of their qualifications. With less than 40% of Americans holding a four-year college degree and many of the skills needed to do these jobs obtainable through alternative educational pathways, this makes no sense. And this is where my bill, the Skills-Based Federal Contracting Act, was born. The Skills-Based Federal Contracting Act would prohibit the federal government from including a minimum educational requirement for proposed contractor personnel in a federal contract solicitation, unless the contracting officer provides a written justification for why the needs of the agency cannot be met without such requirements. Many of our nation's largest employers have begun to dramatically curtail college degree requirements, instead hiring based on skills and competency, and it is far past time we do the same in federal contracting. In some cases, required education credentials are fully justifiable. We expect a doctor to have a medical degree, for instance, but only a fraction of federal contract work falls into this explicit category. It's not too much to ask for a brief written justification from a contracting officer to exclude over 60% of the American people who do not have a four-year degree from an opportunity to contract with the federal government. The federal government shouldn't be barring skilled individuals who didn't read Shakespeare and Ivory Towers from being considered for federal contracting jobs. They deserve a chance to compete. To be clear, this bill in no way tells contractors how to hire or who to hire. Rather, it removes unnecessary federal restrictions on their ability to hire qualified, talented Americans who acquired their skills through alternative training. Supporting skills-based hiring is truly a bipartisan cause, and I thank the lead Democrat co-sponsor of this bill, Representative Krishnamurthy, for joining me in this effort, and I urge all members to support this much-needed bill, and I yield back.
The sponsor yields back. Chair recognizes Mr. Krishnamurthy from Illinois.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm pleased to strongly support H.R. 5235, the Skills-Based Federal Contracting Act that I introduced along with our colleague Nancy Mace. This legislation makes important changes that will help tear down the paper ceiling, the outdated barrier that denies qualified workers a fair shot simply because they lack a 4-year degree. If an individual has the skills, experience, and proven ability to do the job, they are stars, skilled through alternative routes. Our stars deserve full and fair consideration. As the nation's largest employer, the federal government must lead by example and ensure that talent and skills, not educational background, drives opportunity. This legislation has a broad and diverse coalition supporting it, including labor unions, employers, and stakeholders across the political spectrum. This widespread bipartisan backing underscores a simple truth. Skills-based hiring is good for workers, good for employers, and good for the American economy. It's long past time we break down barriers that hold our nation back. I want to thank Representative Mace, the chairman and ranking member, for all their hard work to get the bill to this point. I urge my colleagues to vote yes, and I look forward to the day when we will pass this bill on the House floor. I would also like to address one other bill that's coming up for markup today, Mr. Chairman. I'm pleased to urge my colleagues in support of H.R. 5773, a bill to name the Palatine, Illinois Post Office in honor of Bernie Bluestein. As one of the last surviving members of the World War II American secret unit known as the Ghost Army, Bernie served as a private first class, helping to employ inflatable tanks, fake radio signals, and sound deception to mislead Nazi forces, saving thousands of lives and helping to turn the tide in Europe. But Bernie's impact did not end with his service. He embraced being a community leader in Palatine and at Harper College. He became a beloved artist, mentor, and lifelong learner. And he enriched the community for decades, inspiring generations of students with his creativity, humility, and his humor. Honoring him with this designation ensures that his extraordinary contributions to our nation and community are never forgotten. I urge my colleagues to vote yes on H.R. 5773, and I look forward to the day when we will pass this bill on the House floor. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Any other members seek recognition? Seeing none. The question is now on the amendment in the nature of a substitute. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed signify by saying no. In the opinion chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. The question is now in favor of reporting H.R. 5235. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed signify by saying no. The opinion of the chair, what purposes Mr. Biggs seek recognition?
Request a recorded vote.
Recorded vote is ordered. As previously announced, further proceedings on the question will be postponed. For consideration is H.R. 143, the Unauthorized Spending Accountability Act. The clerk will please designate the bill.
H.R. 143, the Unauthorized Spending Accountability Act, a bill to establish a budgetary level reduction schedule and for other purposes.
Without objection, the bill should be considered as read and open for amendment at any point. Without objection, so ordered. The chair recognizes himself to offer an amendment in the nature of a substitute. Clerk, please designate the amendment.
An amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 143 is offered by Mr. Comer of Kentucky.
Without objection, the amendment is considered as read. The substitute will be considered as original text for the purposes of further amendment. And now I recognize myself for 5 minutes for a statement on the bill and the amendment. Congressional Republicans are committed to ensuring that taxpayer dollars are spent wisely on federal government programs. According to CBO, the federal government spent $500 billion on programs with expired authorizations in fiscal year 2024. About half of these programs expired more than a decade ago. This is unacceptable. Congress needs to pay closer attention to the many federal programs left on autopilot. Many of these programs are operating without regular, diligent congressional oversight and timely legislative authorizations to keep them relevant to the changes of today. The Unauthorized Spending Accountability Act, or USA Act, addresses this problem by requiring Congress to review unauthorized programs on a recurring basis. It also creates a clear process for terminating programs that are no longer needed or which do not have the legislative support within Congress for their reauthorization. The bill would implement a gradual reduction in the overall appropriated funding levels over a 3-year period for the total amount of unauthorized programs. This gives Congress time and appropriate incentives to consider each program and pass necessary reauthorization legislation. It is not too much to ask that Congress provide the appropriate level of scrutiny over the federal programs it has established and find the time every 3 years to ensure that federal funds are being used responsibly and effectively. The time frame under USA Act forces that to happen, ensuring that every federal program is properly authorized gives Congress the oversight and budgetary tools to increase government efficiency, improve the effectiveness of federal agency programs and missions, and help reduce government spending. The purpose of this act is not to threaten federal programs or to question the legality of congressional appropriations. The purpose of this act is to empower Congress to conduct the appropriate oversight and legislative attention to individual agencies and programs. Determining the impact of programs on affected populations is part of the authorization process, and this legislation will ensure that this happens on a continual basis. I call upon my colleagues to support this necessary legislation. I now recognize the ranking member.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I strongly oppose H.R. 143. The USA Act would slash the budget of federal programs funded through the appropriations process, but not authorized by a separate act of Congress. This bill is a way to force through unpopular spending cuts by weaponizing Republicans' agenda in the House. If you want to cut spending, get the votes and cut spending. But the majority can't justify their extreme cuts to the public, so instead they're pushing this workaround to slash programs that serve the American public. The impact of this bill would be severe. In addition to adding to congressional gridlock and dysfunction, according to the TBO, it would threaten cuts for huge priorities, including veterans benefits, funding for community policing, cancer medical research, K-12 education, housing programs, and much more. We should reject it completely. We'll be voting no on this bill, and I urge my colleagues to do the same, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Does any chair recognize Mr. Biggs?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record the support of the Taxpayer Protection Alliance for H.R. 143, the Unauthorized Spending Accountability Act, and also ask unanimous consent to enter into the record the following letter of support from the National Taxpayers Union for H.R. 143, the Unauthorized Spending Accountability Act. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Without objection, so ordered. Any other members seek recognition? Seeing none. The question is now on the amendment, the nature of a substitute. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed signify by saying no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. The question is now on favorably reporting H.R. 143 as amended. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The bill is ordered favorably reported.
A request to record a vote, Mr. Chair.
A recorded vote is ordered. As previously announced, further proceedings on the question will be postponed. Our next item for consideration is H.R. 5578, the Expanding Whistleblower Protections for Contractors Act of 2025. The clerk will please designate the bill.
H.R. 5578, the Expanding Whistleblower Protections for Contractors Act of 2025, a bill to ensure that whistleblowers, including contractors, are protected from retaliation when a federal employee orders a reprisal and for other purposes.
Without objection, the bill should be considered as read and open for amendment at any point. Without objection to order, the chair recognizes himself to offer an amendment in the nature of a substitute. The clerk please designate the amendment.
An amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 5578 is offered by Mr. Comer of Kentucky.
Without objection, the amendment is considered as read, and the substitute will be considered as original text for the purposes of further amendment. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes on the statement on the bill and amendment. Every person employed by the federal government should have adequate protection if he or she reports instances of fraud, waste, or abuse of taxpayer dollars. However, contractors with the federal government have different whistleblower protections than typical government employees. The Department of Housing and Urban Development Officer of Inspector General found that a lack of whistleblower protections for contractors discouraged them from coming forward. This isn't surprising. It's a difficult decision for someone to come forward and risk their job and livelihood. The Expanding Whistleblower Protections for Contractors Act would address this by strengthening whistleblower protections for federal contractors by prohibiting reprisal for certain actions. Such actions include disclosure of information the protected individual believes is evidence of mismanagement, waste, abuse, or substantial and significant danger to public health and safety related to a contract or grant. I urge my colleagues to support this bipartisan bill. I now recognize the ranking member for his statement.
Thank you. I'd like to thank Chairman Comer for the partnership on this important bill to strengthen whistleblower protections for federal contractors. The last bill in front of us today, of course, is also bipartisan. Whistleblowers are crucial to our ability to fulfill our constitutionally mandated congressional oversight. These workers currently do not have the same whistleblower protections as federal civil servants. Contractors are less likely to report wrongdoing if they fear retaliation or mistreatment. This bill will help us do our job, hold the executive branch accountable, and help us provide better, more efficient government services. I urge my colleagues to support the bill, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Does any other member seek recognition on the underlying bill?
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
Who said that? Oh, Ms. Presley. Mr. Perry wishes to speak on the underlying bill. Then we'll get to Ms. Presley's amendment. Chair recognizes Mr. Perry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I ask unanimous consent to enter into the records the support of the Taxpayer Protection Alliance for H.R. 5578, the Expanding Whistleblower Protections for Contractors Act. I also ask unanimous consent to enter into the record the following letter of support, a letter of support from the National Taxpayers Foundation for H.R. 5578, the Expanding Whistleblower Protections for Contractors Act.
Without objection, so ordered. Any other members seek recognition on the underlying bill before we get to the amendment? Chair now recognizes Ms. Presley from Massachusetts. Or actually, Ms. Presley, for what purpose do you seek recognition?
I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will distribute the amendment to all members. The clerk will designate the amendment.
An amendment to the amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 5578 is offered by Ms. Presley of Massachusetts.
Without objection, the amendment is considered as read. I reserve a point of order. The gentlewoman from Massachusetts is recognized for 5 minutes to explain her amendment.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is the first time that the House Oversight Committee has convened since the end of the longest government shutdown in history. And during that shutdown, millions of people across our country felt the consequences of Republican dysfunction, and federal workers were amongst the hardest hit. But unlike federal employees, the thousands of federal contract workers who keep this government running, including janitorial, food, and security service workers, had no assurances that they would ever see a single dollar of the wages that they lost. When the government reopened, their back pay did not come. And again, these are some of the hardest working, lowest paid federal contracted workers. And these are workers who are overwhelmingly women, immigrants, and people of color. And their bills did not stop. Rent was still due. Child care was still needed. Prescriptions still had to be filled and groceries put on the table. We should not have a two-tiered system wherein some workers are deemed worthy of back pay while others are left behind. That is why during the shutdown, I reintroduced with bipartisan support the Fair Pay for Federal Contractors Act legislation to guarantee that contract workers receive back pay after a lapse in appropriations, just as federal employees do. My amendment today would incorporate this bill into the expanding Whistleblower Protections for Contractors Act, which Ranking Member Garcia and Chairman Comer are leading. Whistleblower protections are important, and paycheck protections are important. We cannot say we value workers if we do not protect workers, all workers, both their physical safety and their economic security. Contract workers are a critical part of the federal workforce. They serve the people with the same dedication and professionalism as any federal employee, and they deserve the same respect. During the shutdown, I met with contract workers who drained their savings and took on debt just to make it through. The contract worker in my district that was already living paycheck to paycheck, and then one of those paychecks never came. The custodian who has to choose between paying rent and paying medical bills. The cafeteria worker in Longworth who prepares food for members of Congress and staff but didn't have income to feed herself. A responsible government treats its workers with respect and pays them their back pay. Because fair pay isn't just a matter of fairness, it's about stability. It's about dignity. It's about justice. When we stabilize workers, all workers, when we destabilize them, we destabilize the agencies and services that rely on them. I know what it is to be part of an invisible workforce, doing thankless work where people see right through you. As a former hospitality worker and unpaid congressional intern who worked 3 jobs, I know what it means to live paycheck to paycheck and the struggle to make ends meet. So this is deeply personal to me. I urge my colleagues to support this amendment and stand with workers and the people they serve, and to the federal contract workers who are still recovering from the harms of this shutdown, know this: I see you, I hear you, and I am still fighting for you. Thank you, and I yield back. Gentlelady yields back.
Chair recognizes Mr. Biggs.
Mr. Chairman, I insist upon the point of order as the amendment is not germane to the underlying bill.
We'll pause while I consult with the parliamentarian. I'm prepared to rule after consultation with the parliamentarian. The amendment is not germane to the bill. Therefore, the amendment is not in order. Do any other members seek recognition on the underlying bill? Chair recognizes Mr. Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to just ask unanimous consent to enter the following letters into the record. A letter from the Coalition for Fair Software Licensing, a letter from the Population Association of America, a letter from the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights, a letter from the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers, a letter from the National Treasury Employees Union, a letter from the American AFGE, and a letter from the National Postal Mail Handlers.
Without objection, so ordered. Any other members seek recognition? Question is now on the amendment in the nature of a substitute. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed signify by saying no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. The question is now on favorably reporting. The question now on favorably reporting HR 5578 as amended. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair recognizes Mr. Biggs.
Request a roll call.
A recorded vote is ordered as previously announced. Further proceedings on the question will be postponed. Pursuant to the previous order, the chair declares the committee in recess subject to the call of the chair. We plan to reconvene immediately after the vote series. The vote series is at 3. What's it? 1. 1:30. Oh, I'm sorry. They moved it. But the vote series is at 1:30. Immediately after the conclusion of the vote series, we will come in here and hopefully have a pretty quick markup. So the committee stands in recess until immediately after the first vote series.